All right, today we have an encore sermon for our Twilight Zone series. One final sermon on the Twilight Zone, and today we're going to look at the episode called Eye of the Beholder. Now, this sermon, I started thinking about it probably about 4 weeks ago. For some reason, this one story in Numbers really, I don't know what happened. I woke up in the morning and started thinking about this story for some reason. I don't know. I don't read Numbers very often, as many of you probably don't, or maybe you're a Numbers person. I don't know. Most likely not, because I don't really hear people are like, oh, Numbers, my favorite book of the Bible. Please, can we do more sermons on the book of Numbers? But this story, for some reason, it just became lodged in my brain. And then I was thinking about the Twilight Zone, and this episode in particular, I hadn't watched in a while. But I knew the premise of it, I knew the idea behind it, and these two stories just started sitting side by side in my brain for a bit. Then obviously we've been in an election season, and could I say it hasn't been easy over the past couple of weeks? This week probably wasn't easy for a lot of people, and just leading up to it and hearing the way in which people have been talking to each other, portraying each other, you can tell. And this sermon I thought about way before any result or polling or anything happened on this past Tuesday, but you could just feel it in the air, even leading up to Tuesday, that there is a rift within our country. And regardless of what outcome there would have been on Tuesday, there's healing that is needed in our country. And I think we've been seeing this for a while. It's not like, oh, wow, there was a month leading up to the election, and all of a sudden you started realizing that there's this giant gap and that there's a lot of brokenness and the need for healing. This has been going on for quite a while in our country, and I think the need for healing is maybe greater. Maybe it continues, the need continues to grow. And I had all these thoughts swirling around in my head, and I said, you know what? I'm just going to do one more sermon about it. And I knew that this would be after the election. And as I mentioned, I wrote this way before anything happened on Tuesday. And so I don't really want to necessarily get into everything that happened on Tuesday. I want to talk about the larger picture and the spirit of what's happening, I think, here in our country, and as it relates to these few stories in Numbers 13 and then the episode, The Eye of the Beholder. So we'll start in Numbers chapter 13, and right in verse 1, the Lord said to Moses, "Send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send out one of its leaders." Now I'm going to do a quick disclaimer here on this passage in Numbers, because we could really dive into the ethics of what's going on here, and you might have some concern with, wait, God really wants the Israelites to go in and wipe out the people that are living there. I have some problems with that. So I understand all those concerns, and that's a whole other sermon. We can talk about the ethics and the morality and what's going on in this particular instance here and in what you read in the Old Testament. I want you to set that aside for a little while. And again, we can come back to it at some point. But what I want to look at this morning is kind of the spirit behind the text here, behind all those other ideas that we could talk about in how to understand what's happening here. And I want to talk about the spirit behind this. And so I have a map for us to kind of show you where we are in the story. We're at Numbers 13, and if you were to back up the story a little bit, the Israelites had traveled down to Egypt where they had become slaves for 400 years. Then there was this thing called the Exodus, maybe you've heard of it before, where Moses led the Israelites, the slaves, out of Egypt. Pharaoh, let my people go. They traveled away from Egypt. They crossed the sea. And then they traveled for a bit right here in the middle, this section right here, the Sinai Peninsula. And during this time, God told them, I'm going to make you a nation. I'm going to make you a people. And I am going to give you the promised land, which is what you see pretty much in this area right here. I am going to go before you, I'll wipe out all the inhabitants, and I'm going to give you this land. So in Numbers 13, where we find ourselves in the story is you have a group of people whose past is slavery. They have been slaves, and now they are about to enter into this land where for the first time they will decide who they will be as a people, how they will live, how they will organize themselves. Now, before they enter into this land that God has been telling them, here's where I'm sending you, here's where you're going to go, and think about the anticipation. You've been slaves for a really long time. Now you've been camping out in the desert for who knows how long, and you are ready to go to your new home. Anticipation level is probably like all the way up here. But Moses says, before we go into the land, here's what I want to do. From each tribe, so from 12 tribes, I want you to send one of the leaders. So determine who from each tribe is going to go. One of the people that others look up to. One of the leaders of each tribe. I want you to send them into the land, and they're going to go and they're going to scout it out. So it continues. Moses sent them to explore Canaan. Here's what he told the 12 leaders that had been chosen. Go up through the Negev and out into the hill country. See what the land is like, and whether the people who live there are weak or strong, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good land? Is it bad land? What kind of town? Bad land. Is it a little Bruce Springsteen right there? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or are they fortified? Can we take them easily? Or have they set up some line of defense? How's the soil? Is it fertile? Is it poor? What would our crops be like if we were to start to plant there? Are there trees? Do we have shade? Or is there no trees? Do your best to bring back some of the local fruit of the land. We want to taste the goods. So they went out, these 12 spies as they're known. They go out and for 40 days, they travel around the promised land trying to do an assessment of this land that they are being led into. This land that the entire group are about to go and possess. Now, after 40 days, which is a symbolic number in the Bible, they came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and to the whole assembly. Think about this. You have just sent out 12 people to tell you what this land looks like. Is it good? Is it bad? Are the people strong? Are they weak? Can we take them? Are we more powerful than them? Do we even want to take them? Is the land plentiful? Will it produce good crop? Is this a place where we can go and live and where our families can live and generations after us can go and be prosperous? So everyone hears that the spies have come back. These 12 leaders have come back. What do you think is going to happen? If you hear this, you're going to assemble because you want to know what is the report. So you are eagerly anticipating and you want to taste the fruit too. You know, someone goes away and you're like, hey, do you have any of the food there at the place that you went to? Like, you want to taste the fruit also. You're hoping that they brought back enough for everyone. So everyone now has assembled. And, of course, they showed them the fruit of the land. And they gave Moses this account with everyone pretty much listening. We went into the land which you sent us, and it flows with milk and honey. Look, here's the fruit. Like, this land is great. This is everything that we have been hearing about. Of course, this land would make us rich and prosperous. Then they continue, but the people who live there, they're powerful. And the cities, they're fortified. They're pretty large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, they live in the hill country. You know all these people. You don't want to mess with them. The Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan. Hey, the land's great, but the people, they're pretty strong. They're pretty powerful. You know about all these other groups. Those are the ones living in this land. Like, yes, it's good, but Moses, I'm not so sure we really want to do this thing. Then Caleb, who was one of the leaders who was sent out, silenced the people because everyone at this point is grumbling. You're like, the fruit's great, but the people are strong. We may not live to see the fruit. We may not live to eat the fruit. So everyone is beginning to whisper amongst themselves like, I don't know. This isn't sounding like a great idea. This isn't sounding like this is something that we really want to go and do. But Caleb, he silences everyone. Shh. And he says, here's the deal. I was there. We should go up, take possession of the land, for we certainly can do it. Caleb has a vote of confidence. But the men, the others who went up with him, said, we can't attack those people. They're stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. The land that was flowing with milk and honey, that had great fruit, good soil. It was good land, but yet the people were so strong that they began to spread, because that's how it works. It starts with you, and then it spreads outward, and it continues to spread. It's almost as if that report, it's taking on a life of its own. It has this spirit that is infiltrating the entire group of Israelites. It starts with some of these leaders, and then it spreads to Joe. Well, then it spreads out here to Debbie and Lois in row D, and then it keeps moving its way. And all of a sudden, it's not just this one theater where this bad report is hovering, but now it's hovering over the entire Look Cinemas, and then over Dobbs Ferry, and then Westchester County, and then New York State, and it continues to spread outward from there. You ever experienced this before? There's this feeling that you have, and it's just so pervasive that you can feel it in the air. It's this hovering spirit over a particular area, and it has a life of its own. Now, the land we explored, it devours those living in. If we go in there, it's going to eat us alive. All the people we saw there, they're of great size. We saw the Nephilim there, which that's a whole other sermon we'll get into maybe at some point. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes. Compared to the Nephilim and their size, we felt like this small. And not only did we feel really small, but honestly, we looked the same to them. When they looked at us, they could just step on us. Because we were just, not only do we seem to be grasshoppers in our own eyes, but when they looked, who are these puny people coming into our land? We looked like grasshoppers to them as well. You have 12 spies. 10 spies spread a bad report. 2, Caleb and Joshua, they were up for the challenge. Whose side do you think the others hearing the report took? 10 versus 2. Which side do you think they took? Is it, let's go for it, or is it, whoa, 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 let's think about this a little bit more? Any guesses? That night, all the members of the community raised their voices. They wept out loud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, "If only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us die and fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to slavery? Back to where we've been, to what we've known." And so they said to each other, "We should choose a new leader, and we will go back to Egypt. We'll plead, Pharaoh, please take us back again." Think about where they've been in the story and how they grumbled and complained to get out of Egypt. Now they're grumbling and complaining in order to get back to Egypt. Now, let's talk about Eye of the Beholder for a moment. If you have watched this episode, you know that the story begins with a woman who is all bandaged up, Miss Tyler. She's bandaged up because her face is grotesque. Now, this episode does a great job of not showing you anyone's faces. There's no reveal until much later in the episode. So all you know as you're beginning to watch this episode is that you hear a voice, and she is hoping that these treatments that she is undertaking, these treatments that she's going through, will help fix her face in order to make her appear more normal. She's bandaged up, and then about halfway through the episode, the doctor, the medical staff, they say, "We're about to take the bandages off, and now we will determine whether these treatments have healed you, whether these treatments have made you normal and like the rest of us." They cut the bandages off. The medical staff is horrified at her face. She screams. She's horrified seeing her face because the treatments haven't worked. and she's as ugly as she was before these treatments. Then you finally see the faces of all the actors, and you come to realize the bandaged woman looks like this, which is the picture of ugly in the Twilight Zone, and all the beautiful people, the medical normal people, are right here staring at her, horrified at her face. She is horrified of what she looks like, starts running around the hospital. Eventually, the doctor is able to console her, and he introduces her to this other grotesque-looking man who looks a lot like Zac Efron, I think, right? And his name, I love it, Mr. Smith. Can you get any more vanilla than that? And Mr. Smith comes to take her away where they can go be with people just like them. And they don't need to be a part of normal society where others have to unfortunately look at their faces all day long and be reminded that there is ugliness in the world. Now, here's a disclaimer about this episode. This episode is packed with countless themes to explore. If you watch this one, we could probably talk about this episode for 4, 5, 6 plus weeks. You could talk about fear of the other. You could talk about the destructive power of groupthink, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago. You could talk about prejudice, ugly societal norms, conformity. You could talk about how we are conditioned to believe and act in the world. You could talk about how we view ourselves compared to others. Probably 5 or 6 other sermons in here. What I want to do is look at this episode through one specific lens, and that is how this episode explores our understanding of what's normal. And I want to talk about it on a personal and a collective level. Think about this. Going back to Numbers. This is after everything that we just read, where you have all these leaders who have said, it's great, but I don't know, people are grumbling, can we go back to Egypt? Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, they tore their clothes because they were upset. God is leading us in this space. God will provide for us. We need to trust and move and listen to where the Spirit is leading. They tore their clothes. They said to everyone who had gathered, the land we passed through and explored, it's exceedingly good. It's not just good, it's exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he'll lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. But what did the whole assembly do? They talked about stoning them. Let's get rid of these guys. It wasn't good enough just to grumble against them or to choose a new leader. Now the whole assembly is talking about doing physical harm to these 2 men who are trying to persuade the assembly to move forward into where God is leading them. What was considered normal in this story in Numbers? Fear. Attacking those with a different message. Attacking verbally, but now threatening physical attack against those who had a different message. What was normal was a return to what is known, to what's comfortable. Let's go back to Egypt. Yeah, it's slavery, but at least we knew what it was like. We had learned to manage to live that way. Let's return to where we've been before, to that which is comfortable and known. What was considered normal? Unbelief. Unbelief in God, in the power of God. Also unbelief in themselves. We seem like grasshoppers. We can't accomplish, we can't do this. This was the norm amongst the assembly of people. Now, this is very normal when standing on the edge of something new. Of course it is. Whenever you're about to progress into something that is new and unknown and different, well, there's a certain level of fear. There's some anxiety about, well, what's going to happen? What's it going to mean for me to now step into this new phase of existence? Will God truly provide the way in which I think God will provide? Will God even provide at all. Whenever you're stepping into something new, it's normal to have a level of fear. But if those feelings, the anxiety and the fear, if they're not channeled in a healthy way, it can turn ugly. And now, ugliness, fear, becomes normalized. See, the problem in this episode is that this way of being, what we see right here, for us watching, well, this becomes normalized in society. This is considered, in the Twilight Zone, normal. What we consider normal is considered ugly. It's flipping everything upside down. There are unhealthy ways of channeling fear, the unknown, and differences. And so what happens is it becomes normal in a society to attack others who look or think differently than you. It's considered, well, this is just what we do. This is how the world works. If there's someone who looks differently than me, someone who thinks differently, well, everyone else is doing it, so it's okay to pile on them. It's okay to verbally attack, possibly physically attack someone who looks or thinks differently than you. Everyone's doing it. I see it on social media. I hear about it in the news. This becomes a normal way to be. If fear and anxiety aren't channeled in healthy ways, well, it becomes normal to fear and become anxious about that which you don't know, and to not spend any effort to learn about who or what you don't know. Well, that looks different. That's uncomfortable. I'm going to just hold my fear and my anxiety about this group, that person, this idea, what they're thinking, rather than lean in and get curious or get to know someone who looks a little different than you. So it becomes normal to stand at a distance and to just simply attack and live from a place of fear rather than a place of curiosity. It can become normal to spend your life in relative comfort. And there are plenty of ways that we can live in comfort. Many of us do it each night at the end of the night as we recline on the sofa to just disengage from the world. And there are moments when we need that, of course. You can't always carry the weight of everything, nor can you carry the weight of everything. You have to choose what you will care about. Yes, but it can become normal to simply live in a perpetual state of comfort rather than to step out, to risk, to trust that God is with you. Think about the story in Numbers. Everyone, can we go back to the comfortable? I mean, they were so uncomfortable with change and the new and the uncertainty that they'd forgotten how bad it was to be a slave in Egypt. So it can become normal to want to go back to how it was before and to forget about how bad it might have been before rather than to step into something entirely new. In such a society, it can become normal to compare your looks, your accomplishments, your status with others. Think about Miss Tyler under the bandages. She was comparing her looks with the looks of the medical staff and all the other normal people. And then the bandages are uncovered and you're watching as the audience like, wait a second, that's weird. But yet in this society, that had become normal, and she was comparing how she looked, who she was, to everyone else around her. I love this quote by the author Anne Lamott. Never compare your insides to everyone else's outsides. How often do we do this? We compare how we feel about ourselves to what everyone is portraying or who they're portraying themselves to be externally. You have no idea what's going on inside of someone's heart. But yet how often do we compare what's going on inside us to how others are portraying themselves? Such a society, it become normal to allow others' definitions of beauty and ugliness to become how you see yourself and the world. Well, they're saying this is beautiful. They're saying this is ugly. Well, so then it must be true. Everyone else wants to stone Caleb and Joshua and go back to Egypt. Well, then that must be the right thing to do. If we don't have healthy ways to channel and grow from our fear and anxiety, well, ugliness can become normalized in a society. And then it can become normal to see yourself as a grasshopper about to get stepped on. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. Yeah. We have nothing. We're so small. We're puny. We're insignificant. The power of God at work in me, it's nothing compared to what I'm up against. There's no way God could overcome that, or God could heal that, or God could use me to bring more peace and hope and love into the world, because I'm simply a grasshopper compared to the magnitude of the moment. And then it can become normal to have little faith in what God can accomplish through you, as we just talked about. I'm not going to show this clip right now for sake of time. If you want to go back, you can go back and watch Eye of the Beholder. Great episode. But the clip that I was going to show was the end scene where the doctor brings Miss Tyler to Mr. Smith. And Mr. Smith has this conversation with her, and he says, if you come with us, you can have a sense of belonging. Isn't that what we all truly want? We want to be a part of something. And the truth is we want to create communities, spaces, societies where everyone is able to belong. We don't want to create pockets where, well, there's one group right here and they can all belong amongst themselves here, and then another group can belong here. But the church, operating at its finest, and this is what you see all throughout the New Testament, it's a community of people belonging who have absolutely no reason to belong to each other. But their differences are transcended because they are all rooted in Jesus. I believe a society working at its best is a place that creates spaces of belonging for every single person. Ugliness happens when you relegate some people to the side and say, well, it's okay for you to exist with your people here as long as you don't come and mess up what we have going on here. You can live side by side, but you can't integrate into our community. And then what happens here is Mr. Smith says to Miss Tyler, don't worry, everything is going to work out. And here's a saying that others have told me that's been really helpful. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. To me, this is the wisdom of the episode. And let me explain how. Because you have the power to choose what you will define beautiful and what you will define as ugly. You have the power not to let anyone else dictate to you what is beautiful and what is ugly. You can decide for your life what you will deem to be a beautiful way to live. You can decide for yourself what creates more destruction and more harm. You have the power to choose. How? It's found in this conversation. I will play this quickly. And this is a scene where the doctor is very confused about the whole situation. And he's having a conversation with his nurse about Miss Tyler and what he's seen in working with her. Can we put on some sound for this one? Okay, so I'm going to play this clip right here. I want you to listen to this conversation between the doctor, the male voice, and then the nurse, who's the female voice.
You look tired, Doctor.
Do I? Well, I hadn't thought about it. I suppose I am.
You've been under a great deal of tension. I know how much it means to you, this case in 307.
Well, you try to be impersonal about these things. You do everything medically possible, everything humanly possible, and then in the end, you cross your fingers and you hope for a miracle. And you know, once in a while, a miracle does happen just often enough to let you know that you're not wrong or foolish to hope for one.
But you're destroying yourself this way. Forgive me, but You mustn't let yourself get personally involved here.
I know. You think I haven't told myself that? But you see, nurse, I've looked underneath those bandages.
So have I. It's horrible.
No, I mean deeper than that. Deeper than that pitiful, twisted lump of flesh. Deeper even than that misshapen skeletal mask. I've seen that woman's real face, nurse. The face of her real self. It's a good face. It's a human face.
I understand.
You have the doctor who knows he's getting too personal. He's getting too involved with this case. But he says, I really can't help it because I've looked under the bandages. I've seen her true face, her human face. The nurse can't quite comprehend. She's like, I looked under the bandages too. Oh, that face is repulsive. Yet he says, no, I mean underneath that. He said, it's a good face. It's a human face. And the nurse, she'll go on to say, well, I feel better about seeing her humanity when her face is covered, when I don't have to look at her, when I don't have to engage with her. Then I can believe. But if I have to interact with her and actually see that face, the one that's on the outside, well, I can't see her true humanity. And the doctor then asks, he says, well, why must we feel that way, nurse? Isn't there something wrong about that way of living? Why can't we see the true face of others? Why can't we see the humanity that others carry within them? The doctor is admitting there's something wrong with this way of living. We have normalized this way of living, but something is off. So how do you heal the ugliness? And how do you make beauty normal? You have to find a way to look at the true human face of every single person. This is true for others, and it's also true for yourself. And here's what helps me. How does God view you? How does God see every single one of us? And I mean every single one of us. I don't mean just one group of people who have everything right, because sometimes you'll hear that in churches. Well, God views us this way, and everyone else, God looks at differently. No. How does God view every single person? Through the lens of the cross. God sees in every single person the true human face. It's someone who is worthy of love. Someone who's forgiven. Someone who holds immense power and value. We get off track when we don't see others through this lens. We get off track when we think that others aren't worthy of love. Or when we think ourselves aren't worthy of being loved. We get off track when we bandage others up. Or when we bandage ourselves up. How do we heal the ugliness we see in our world? You have to see the true human face that every single person possesses. And look at each person the way in which God views them, through the lens of the cross. Someone valued, worthy, loved, and forgiven. We come to this story here where the entire assembly wants to stone Joshua and Caleb. What did the two of them represent? See, the entire assembly, they weren't looking at their human face. They were looking at the exterior. The assembly wasn't able to see their true humanity. They weren't able to hear their true voice because they were just focused on the exterior. Because to Caleb and Joshua, they represented all that everyone feared. They represented an unknown. The uncomfortable truth of having to learn to live in a new way. Learning a new way of being in the world. A new way of interacting with others. And by just looking at their exterior, it led to isolation. We have more fear when we're isolated. When we segregate one group to this side and keep a group here, it leads to isolation, which then creates more fear and more anxiety, and I would argue more ugliness in the world. The episode begins with a woman who is completely isolated. At the end, she has an opportunity to belong to a community. Is it perfect? No, because it's still separate from society as a whole, but she has an opportunity to belong and to heal that which has been created from her isolation. Community, belonging is what heals. So how will we heal the ugliness? Through trust, courage, love, curiosity, spending our limited energy working towards healing, not arguing or casting stones at others. Here's some timely wisdom I came across this week. After the election, we'll have to learn to live together again. Neighbor with neighbor, friend with friend, family member with family member, congregant with congregant. The way to healing is we're going to have to find a way to learn to live together, to be curious about those who are different than us, to see others through the lens of love. Yes, it feels like it's going to take a lot. It feels like we're up against giants and we appear like grasshoppers. This is the task that is set before us, to see the true face, the human face of others. And you don't allow others' definition of beauty to influence your definition. You locate beauty within, based off divine truth for how you see yourself and how you see others. And here's how I believe God defines beauty. It's found in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Love, can we say beauty, is patient, is kind. It doesn't envy, doesn't boast. It's not proud. It does not dishonor others. Beauty is not self-seeking. It's not easily angered, keeps no record of wrongs. Love or beauty does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. So this week, as we move forward, may you help to heal any of the ugliness that has become normalized in our society. May you help create a world of beauty. May you help be about healing and showing love to others, treating others with respect, and seeing others through the lens of the cross, the way in which God sees every single one of us. People who are worthy, loved, and valued.